Curiosity has a way of shaping a life, sometimes quietly, sometimes in ways that ripple far beyond your own career. Welcome to the Marquis Masters podcast. I'm Nick Franck. Today I'm joined by Dr. Tracey Scherban, a former engineer, professor, and passionate advocate for women in science. Now, this conversation goes well beyond just one story. We also dive into the journeys of two remarkable women, Camille Schrier, who brought a science experiment to the Miss America stage and used that platform to make STEM more visible, and Arlene Blum, a chemist and mountaineer whose work has influenced both environmental policy and public safety. Together, these stories paint a bigger picture of curiosity, resilience, and what it really looks like to build a life in science across different generations. We talk about the moments that spark these paths, the importance of mentorship and representation, and why creating access to science still matters more than ever. Let's get into it. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Tracey Scherban to the Marquis Masters podcast, the influential Women in Science edition. Dr. Scherban, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Let's just kick it off by telling me a little bit about yourself.
Yes, well, my name is Tracey Scherban. I'm a retired engineer and professor, and I have served as the chair of the Women's Chemists Committee for the American Chemical Society, Portland, Oregon section. In that role, I organized a Women in Science Symposium last September, which brought together young women and STEM professionals to network and talk about women in science and what it's like to have a career in science. And I've organized two such symposia, the goal of which is to make science accessible and make young women feel that it's not beyond their means to enter the field of science, technology, engineering, and so on. And that particular symposium was a great success. We had excellent feedback, and the goal is to continue doing such things in the future. However, today what I would like to do is, after this symposium, I got to thinking about, hey, how about, introducing influential women in science? And so at first I was thinking of Nobel laureates, and there are very few of those who are women. But I went beyond that and just thought about people that I know or have heard of. And so today I will be talking about two very remarkable women. The first is Dr. Camille Schrier. She is a doctor of pharmacy, and she is the first woman to use a science demonstration as part of the talent show for the Miss America competition. She won Miss America in 2019. That was actually during COVID, so she was asked to stay on for another year, and she interrupted her doctoral studies to serve as Miss America and promote science to the country and to the world. She had a special program which was called Minding Your Meds, and this was focused on the abuse of opiates and opioid addiction in this country. And she continues to be involved in that. She also made a point of emphasizing the role of STEM education. The second woman that I will be talking about is Arlene Blum, PhD. She is executive director of the Green Science Policy Institute in Berkeley, California. And she's also known as being the first woman, the first person, to lead the ascent of Annapurna, which is said to be the most challenging of the world's peaks. She led an all-female team to the summit of Annapurna. And then later, she led an all-female team to the summit of Denali in Alaska. So she is known as a mountaineer, but she also has many accomplishments in the field of biochemistry. And we share our alma mater, Reed College in Portland, Oregon. So I'll talk a little bit about the first mountain she climbed, Mount Hood, just outside of Portland.
Yeah. Well, let's start with Camille. What was it like meeting her? What was that experience like?
Meeting Camille Schrier was fascinating. We were strangers at the start of the interview and friends by the end. We share a passion for promoting women and girls in science. And right from a young age, we were both very curious about the natural world, about nature, cooking, yeast rising, caterpillars turning into butterflies, looking up at the night sky at the constellations and trying to identify the patterns of stars. We were never afraid of science. Camille calls herself a self-proclaimed nerd. She's decomposition of hydrogen peroxide at the Miss America competition in 2019, and she wowed the crowd and the judges with her performance. This is also called elephant's toothpaste, and if you want, you can go to YouTube and you can put in Camille Schrier, Miss America, and you can watch that demonstration because it is truly amazing. So she was showing the world that science is fun, that women can do science, and she put a spotlight on women in science. She was crowned Miss America in 2020, and in that role, she interrupted her doctoral studies to travel and to promote women in science. And she also had a special program called Mind Your Meds, which is focused on opium addiction, a subject she feels very strongly about. She also emphasized the importance of STEM education for all. And so we had a very interesting conversation, and I was very happy to make her acquaintance.
Yeah. Now, let's get into Arlene Blum. Now, I've been to Mount Hood before, but I've never climbed it before. And you said she has climbed it, and then she became very interested in science. So kind of talk about that experience with her.
Yes, well, Arlene Blum is also a very fascinating person. She was inspired to study chemistry by a young female chemistry professor at Reed College. That is both of our alma maters. I attended in the 70s. She attended in the 60s. This chemistry professor's name was Jane Schell, and she inspired Arlene, and Arlene became passionate about chemistry. Her Reed chemistry thesis, which is required of all Reed students in their senior year, combined her love of chemistry with her love of mountains. She collected fumarole samples on Mount Hood, which is an active volcano just east of Portland, Oregon, and after she analyzed all of her results, she predicted that one of the mountains in this chain would erupt in the coming years. And that was in 1966 that she wrote her thesis. And in 1980, Mount St. Helens in the state of Washington erupted in a cataclysmic explosion which blew the top off of it. It looks like an upside-down ice cream cone, and now the top is entirely flat. And there's a Mount St. Helens Visitor Center, which is absolutely fascinating, which covers that eruption and the aftermath. So she did that while she was at Reed College. And then I will talk to you a little later about how she went on to climb some of the world's highest peaks.
Yeah, I'm curious to dive into that part. I've been to Mount Hood before, never climbed it, don't have any real desire to climb it. Did you or did any of of Arlene or Camille ever feel like being a woman ever hindered the ability to break into the STEM field?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me that question, and so I had to ask that question of them. And all of us feel the same way. Absolutely not. We never felt hindered in any way because of our gender. And for me in particular, I benefited from very strong role model mentors who were men, not women. These were men. The first was when I was at Intel right after graduating from Reed College, and there was Dr. William Harshbarger, who was one of the forerunners in plasma etching, which is what I did during a few years at Intel before I went on to graduate school. When I went to Columbia University, I had an ideal role model mentor, Dr. Arthur Noack, and he was a mentor, a research advisor, as well as a friend. And I learned so much from him, and he never wavered in his confidence in my abilities. So I was very fortunate in that regard. Camille Schrier always pursued what she is passionate about, and she's passionate about science. I asked her if she was ever dismissed as a bimbo due to her beauty, because oftentimes beautiful women are thought to not be very intelligent. So she dismissed that notion with her science demonstration at the Miss America pageant, in which she definitively showed that beauty and intelligence are not mutually exclusive. As far as Arlene Blum, she attended Reed College, and she said she encountered no bias towards women there, But after graduating from Reed, she went to MIT, and she said that was really not a great place for women. And so after being there for a year, she decided to move on, and she went to UC Berkeley, where she continues to this day as a research associate of cell and molecular biology.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered how some people's stories live on, not just through their work, but through history itself? For nearly 130 years, Marquis Who's Who has been documenting the lives of leaders, innovators, and changemakers across every profession. From CEOs and scientists to artists and educators, Marquis has captured the stories behind success, the people who define our times. Being listed in Marquis Who's Who isn't just recognition, it's taking control of your personal brand and using it to create a meaningful and impactful legacy. It's a record of your life's work, preserved, published, and accessible to generations who will study, research, and be inspired by your contribution. If you've built something meaningful and you've made an impact in your field or community, this is how you ensure your story is told and your personal brand is maintained accurately with integrity. Visit marquiswho'swho.com to learn more about how you or someone you admire can be featured, because history remembers those who take the time to record it.
And when you think back on your illustrious career and the accomplishments that you have been able to achieve, can you boil it down to one? Do you have like a greatest one that you consider?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had to think long and hard about this because I really had two careers. One where I studied protonic conductors at Columbia University, as well as the Laboratoire d'Ionique et d'Electrochimie de Solide in Grenoble, France. And then at Intel, I got into an entirely different field, which was interfacial adhesion of thin films. But I think the one that stands out for me is when I was in Grenoble. I actually went there to work with a woman named Christiane Poissignon, who was involved in research on protonic conductors at the synchrotron in Grenoble. But just before I went there, I had a National Science Foundation grant. The synchrotron got a crack in it, and so it was shut down for an entire year. So as a result of that, I did my research with Dr. Guy Lucasot, who was a specialist in Raman spectroscopy. And Raman is a technique which studies crystallography. And so by looking at a number of different protonic conductors doped with different rare earth ions, I was able to show a relationship between crystal symmetry and conduction properties. And that was really a breakthrough that led to the discovery of new and, better protonic conductors. And these protonic conductors are used in hydrogen fuel cells. And so now, you look out on the street these days, you see a lot of electric vehicles, you see cars with hydrogen fuel cells. So that was really groundbreaking work back in, it was 1991 that I was in Grenoble, France. And I also got to eat a lot of great French food and go skiing and go hiking and drive a Citroën CX. So it all worked out fine. As far as Camille Schrier, when I asked her, Camille considers her greatest accomplishment her work with understanding the disease Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, with which she was diagnosed as a young girl. And this disease is poorly understood. It often goes undiagnosed. She advocated for better understanding of this illness while living with a chronic condition. She was able to directly help people living with this condition so that they could have better quality of life. As far as Arlene, when she was a postdoctoral researcher at Stanford University, she demonstrated something. She was actually working with Dr. Bruce Ames. And what they did is they discovered that a particular chemical called tris that was used in children's pajamas during the 1970s was carcinogenic. They wrote a paper in Science, and 3 months later, pajamas containing tris were banned in the United States. So that was a significant accomplishment for her.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, just all of you, just the incredible accomplishments. And when you kind of zoom out outside of the science realm, like, what did you all three consider some of your greatest personal accomplishments?
Yes. So these two women obviously have remarkable accomplishments outside of their scientific work. Myself, I had kind of, several incarnations. I was a researcher at Columbia. I was a postdoc in France. Then I came back to the United States and I worked as an engineer at Intel. Then I was an engineering manager. And then after I left Intel, I was a volunteer. And then I became a chemistry instructor as well as a chemistry professor. And so if I look at everything taken together, I would say that my greatest accomplishment would be my outreach work, mainly with the American Chemical Society. In 2016, this was after I left Intel, I was awarded a presidential climate science grant from the American Chemical Society, and I wrote up a grant proposal in which I worked with experts in climate science who I contacted. One was Dr. Julie Fry from Reed College. She's an environmental chemist. And then I had some people from Portland State University as well. And I advertised a class where college students could come and learn about climate science. And so we had a full-day class at OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. They learned about climate science, and then they used that knowledge to develop hands-on demonstrations for the public at this museum. And those demonstrations were focused on things like greenhouse gases, ocean acidification, and we had several weekends that year in the fall where we set up shop at the museum and people came and they got to do these hands-on demonstrations and they were really a great success. In addition to that, I organized 2 Women in Science Symposia, which I have talked about a little bit. Let me show you the logo. So I actually contacted artificial intelligence. I contacted an image generator for help with this logo. And so I also worked with a graphic artist, but I have to give credit to my AI friend. This is the bag, if you can see it. And we put on the bag Aristotle's elements. So Aristotle, going way back, he came up with 4 elements. And these elements are air, earth, fire, and water. And the center is the women's symbol to focus on women's accomplishments in science and technology throughout history. The symposium was called the American Chemical Society Women in Science Elaine Naum Memorial Symposium. It was held September 28th, 2025 in Portland, Oregon. And Elaine Naum helped me organize the first Women in Science Symposium in 2018. But she had an early exit with cancer, and so that's why we honored her in this last symposium last year. So moving on then to Camille Schrier, her greatest accomplishments outside of the field of science would have to be her work with something called Her Royal Scientist. She collaborates with the largest science museum in the country, which is located in Columbus, Ohio. It's called CAUSI. It's the Center of Science and Industry. And she has developed a kit that is available if you go to CAUSI's website. And children or adults can order this kit, and they can do science at home. And so this is a way to reach out to young people as well as anyone interested in science to start thinking about, hey, what happens if I do this and this, and how does science affect my everyday life? And so that's what she considers a very strong contribution outside of her scientific work, even though this is science related. As far as Arlene Blum, working with the Green Science Policy Institute, she has in recent years done a lot to change government policy. So as a student at Berkeley, as I said before, they were able to ban the chemical tris in pajamas for children. She has continued to work with regulating flame retardants in all kinds of materials, from the leather in car vehicles to bottles that are used in containing any kind of liquids. And so at one time her biggest challenge was climbing mountains. Now it's changing science policy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, just the list of accomplishments, both science and personal, is just outstanding. And when you think about future women and future women having the opportunity to get into the STEM field, what would you say to those that might be a little uncertain about that path?
I say to young women as well as young men, I told my son this. I said, basically, you can do whatever you want to do in life. If you choose science, you're never going to be bored. Camille says you can't go wrong with a career in science. And Arlene says it's important to pursue what you're passionate about and believe in yourself.
And you mentioned your son. How have you, over your life, balanced that career with family life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because, of course, I grew up in a family of 4 girls. I was the youngest. And my older sisters were about 14 years older than me. So they were role models. They were in high school when I was, a young child. And so I watched them go off to college, and this was the 60s. This was women's lib. And so as I was growing up, I said, hey, I'm going to do whatever I want, and I'm going to be a scientist. And along the way, I had to work at an insurance company, which is what my mother wanted me to do. But when it came time for me to go to college, I went to Reed College, and then I never looked back after that. But anyway, so, I pursued a scientific degree, and that took 5 years, which at Reed, that was typical because, especially in chemistry, you had to take a lot of required classes. Then I went on to Intel for a few years, and then I traveled a little bit. I traveled in Asia for 4 months before starting at Columbia University, and that was another 5 years. And then I was a postdoc. And then I ended up at Intel. Anyway, all of a sudden, I'm in my 30s, and I'm like, okay, well, how about having a child? And so, I didn't have a child until I was 40 years old. So I had to prove myself at Intel. And, at a lot of American companies, there's kind of a mommy track. I didn't find that at all. In France, I found that, there were as many women as men at my lab, and there was a respect for families and sharing responsibilities for families. At many companies in America, it's not that way at all. Women, they have to do the bulk of the work related to child rearing. And if they have careers, they have to manage their careers as well as that. So, it was challenging. And after I had my son, I did go back to work. But after a few years, I decided, okay, I want to raise my son and have the time to do that and not have to just, steal moments at night or, weekends to be with him. So it was a tough decision, but after a few years, he was 3 years old, I made the decision to resign. And, my superiors at Intel respected that decision. And then I, started volunteering at his elementary school, and I started, traveling with him and just showing him how fascinating science could be. So he has taken that, and he's, I guess I shouldn't talk about this, but we would do things like I would go to Fred Meyer, which is a store in Portland, and I would get dry ice, and I would take that into my classes at Portland Community College. Well, I always had a little bit left over. So I brought that home, and I said, hey, you want to play with some dry ice? Oh, yes, he wanted to play with the dry ice. And so what did we do? Well, we had to wear goggles, first of all, and we did it outside. But he would do things like, take a plastic bottle, never glass. You take a plastic bottle, you put some dry ice in there, and then you fool around and you add some water. Anyway, you end up with explosions. And so he did that. So I also took him to Reed College to meet some of my professors, and we visited with Marsh Cronin, my organic professor. And he had a lab. Even after he retired, he continued to do research in cancer research. And the first thing he said to my son when he was 3 or 4 years old is, science is not about explosions. So he said, you can do great things in science and you don't have to see explosions. So anyway, and what my son is currently doing, no explosions. He's at Columbia University Electrical Engineering Department, and he's doing research on motor control for electric cars. And actually, most of what he's doing is simulation, computer simulation. And so he's very excited about his research. He's traveling all over the world giving talks. And so I'm very proud of him, and he's followed in my footsteps. His office is 2 floors above where my office was in the mud building at Columbia, but he has an entirely different view of Manhattan because in that time the Manhattan skyline has changed. In any case, yes, so myself, I did make that tough decision. Arlene Blum also had a child late in life, Annalise. She was 42 when she had her daughter, and she wanted to show her daughter the beauty of mountains. So when her daughter was only 3 months old, she strapped her on her back and she trekked across the European Alps with her. And I asked her, hey, weren't you worried, like maybe if she got sick, like my son had earaches all the time? She said, nope, I was out there in nature. I knew that I could handle it. And her husband came along as well, but they spent, I think, a month or more just hiking the Alps. Camille Schrier, she loves her family. She has a beloved dog that she was given as a gift from her parents when she won Miss America in 2020. And she is very engaged with the young women that she connects with through her outreach work. And so, we all share, a passion for our work, but we also like to, have the love of our families and our friends.
Yeah. I love that. You went around making explosions with your son. My dad, I remember, busted out the welding torch for me. Like your core memories that you have when you're a kid of these cool things.
Well, and fireworks. Everybody loves a good fireworks show.
Right. Especially boys. Something about explosions and boys, right? From your conversations with Camille and Arlene, any final thoughts to round out those conversations?
Yeah, I had to reflect upon this for a while. And as I say, I was just so impressed with both of them. But, they're 50 years apart in age and they're generations apart. But they have so much in common. They speak the same language. And they speak the language of strong women who are pushing boundaries in scientific as well as non-scientific pursuits. They're both strong advocates for women and girls in science. And in addition, they're strong advocates for protecting the public from dangerous substances, be it carcinogenic chemicals or addictive drugs. They are committed to using science as a tool to do good for both society and the planet. And it was really my great pleasure to meet them and get to know them.
It was awesome. Well, it was really great to learn more about them. I actually do remember Camille, my wife, is a big fan of the Miss America pageant program. And so I actually do remember watching that exact her presentation on stage of doing the science experiment. Once you started talking about it, I was like, oh, I vividly remember that.
Well, and I spoke to her about that because I said, now, how exactly did you get into beauty pageants? And so she got into beauty pageants as a teenager, but then, of course, she was a doctoral student when she went and she won. And she said, well, she decided to go back because they had eliminated the bathing suit competition. They were trying to look at it more seriously, and they had expanded upon the talent part of the competition. And so she felt that they had made some changes to the program, which really was trying to, show women not just as symbols of beauty, but as people who had accomplishments and, talents and, things that they could demonstrate to the world that went beyond just beauty.
Right. And kind of talking about demonstrating to the world, last February, you had the opportunity to attend the International Women and Girls in Science Assembly at the United Nations in New York City. Talk about that. What was that like?
It was just simply amazing. I learned about it because we had put together a list of resources for the young women who attended the symposium back in September. And then I was looking through that and I said, oh, yeah, there's an annual meeting that takes place on February 11th at the United Nations. And so I went online and I looked and I applied. And that was at the very start of the year. And then I didn't hear for a while. And I thought, okay, it must have been full. The week before the event, I get an email, hey, you can, come and get your security badge and go. And so I dropped everything. I booked a flight to New York. I was living in Hollywood already at the time. And so I flew to New York and I stayed for a week, and I attended this event on February 11th, and it was just simply amazing. The platform was synergizing AI, social sciences, STEM, and finance, and building inclusive futures for women and girls. It was stressed that inclusive science delivers better outcomes for society as a whole. Close up is what every woman and girl needs, and every girl should be able to imagine a future in science. The most impressive speaker of all the speakers, and there were diplomats, there were princesses, there were, business people. There was a 9-year-old Korean girl who spoke about her experience as a budding scientist. And she stated that, science is not something for geniuses. Anybody can do it. And she also said that we need cartoons that show, superheroes who are women scientists. And she was so well spoken and so eloquent that when she finished, she received a standing ovation. And so I spoke to her afterwards and said, "Hey, you're the only one who got a standing ovation. You were the best speaker of everyone here today." And yeah, and her parents were there, and her parents were so proud of her. So that was just truly amazing. Yes, it was it really think about the fact that, hey, this isn't just something that, we're looking at in this country. This is worldwide. Women in science, women struggle worldwide with certain barriers, and women have to break those barriers to break into this. One of the, so I mentioned AI, so one of the central themes was the fact that only 20% of AI researchers are women. In the STEM educational area, 33% of STEM students are women. And so there is definitely a gender gap that needs to be addressed. And in particular, looking at AI, well, AI is going to take over the world in a few years. And so how do we want that AI to develop? Do we want to have a skewed perspective towards men, or do we want it to be balanced? And I think, women do bring different perspectives to the table. One thing in particular I think that women are better at is compromise. And I mentioned Elaine Nam. One of the things that we did in the we had a quote from her, and that quote is, she has a quote about compromise, and she said, compromising does not mean a person's ideas are not important. Compromising is taking the best ideas from everyone to have a successful final product.
Yeah. That's such a powerful quote. And it, with Elaine, you've talked a few times about the symposiums that you've organized, and one of them you dedicated, it was the American Chemical Society Women in Science Elaine Nam Memorial Symposium that you did back in Portland in September. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one thing I'm very proud of is I've attended a lot of conferences over the years all over the United States and Europe. And this particular one, because it was dedicated to Elaine, I wanted to do something special. And so I had attended a jazz show in Portland, and I had met a professor of jazz from Portland State University. And after the show, I said, "Hey, I'm doing this Women in Science Symposium. Would you consider coming?" She said, "Okay." So I said, "Let's do a couple of songs at the end of this symposium." And one of them was a song that I heard her do that evening, which was called Birdie, and it was about a bird spreading its wings. And then the second one, I thought, and I'm a big fan of bossa nova. And so I had a collection of Astrid Gilberto songs, and I found a particular song that she agreed to sing, actually in Brazilian, Portuguese. It was a Brazilian song, and it was called Goodbye Sadness. And that's how the symposium ended, and it was just beautiful. She sang, and there was a woman who is one of the only female band leaders in Portland who played piano. This was held at Call Auditorium at Reed College, which is an auditorium designed for chamber music. And so it was just perfect for this. And she invited the audience to sing along with her. And That's how we ended the symposium. But we started it with some incredible speakers. The speaker who kicked off the symposium was a professor of philosophy at Reed College, and her work focuses on scientific advancement throughout the ages. And so she's the one who really brought up Aristotle's Elements. And oh boy, she talked about Aristotle's Elements and the interrelationships between these four elements. And she was so impressive that at the end of it, I got up and said, should we give her an honorary chemistry degree? And so the chemistry as it was first understood, and it was just fascinating. Another stellar speaker that we had, and oh boy, I had to really work hard to get her, but Heidi Ram is one of the only female zoo directors in the country. And she talked about how women are making a difference at the Oregon Zoo, from students who lead summer schools for children all the way up to, veterinarians who are looking at, helping the animals. She's had several programs there to address endangered species. They have actually gotten some endangered species off the list. And so she was really incredible. And she talked about opportunities for young girls to get internships at the zoo. And then, of course, she showed lots of very cute pictures of the animals, including some elephants that are very popular at the Oregon Zoo.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about the speakers, but what about the students? How did you get them to engage and participate?
Yes, the students. So one thing that I decided to do in order to motivate the students, or just get them to think about science a little bit before attending, is when they applied to attend the symposium, they had to answer two questions. One question was, what fascinates you about science? And the other was, why would you like to attend this symposium? And then of the 50 or so high school students, I went through all of their answers, which just about brought me to tears. And they, at the end of the symposium, they went up on stage and they read their answers. And some of them were just a single sentence. Some of them were a few sentences. But I want to read you a couple of them. So, what fascinates you about science? Ji-Hoo Lim of Lincoln High School said, I am fascinated by the boundless nature of science. Our Noranagara Reed College student said, I see science as a way to understand the universe. Vivian Tai of Tigard High School answered, what fascinates me most about science is how it explains the world while leaving space for wonder. So, and believe me, all were just so incredible that it was hard to choose. But these women, they read their answers and then they got prizes. Actually, everyone who attended got a prize for providing feedback. So we got great feedback.
Yeah. Do you feel like that kind of helped encourage the students to attend, like
Yes,
to embrace science, right?
I had to think about, hey, why do I like science? And, our feedback was just absolutely incredible. We got 4.9 out of 5 in terms of what's your overall impression of this symposium. And the student feedback was, I was just so inspired. We also had panel discussions where students could ask the panelists about, hey, what's it like to, be a scientist, a teacher, an engineer, a government employee. And we had such incredible discussions, and I think everyone came away just feeling good.
Yeah. And when you think about people that you grew up, like your elder sisters that were role models for you, or Elaine, or for girls today, someone like Camille or Arlene, how important are role models?
Role models are extremely important. And that's actually one point that this young Korean girl made, that it is very important to have role models. Role models matter because they inspire young women to embrace science and to follow in the footsteps of people that they admire.
Yeah. And when you think about the importance of women in STEM, and especially in STEM roles, I mean, I think, I don't want to just say why is it important, because I think it's just important to have different perspectives in this, but why do you feel like the growth of having more women voices in STEM roles is so valuable?
Mm-hmm. When women lead, research becomes more creative and economies become more sustainable. women bring soft skills and balance out teams of largely male professionals. I can't tell you how many high-level meetings I attended at Intel where I was the only woman in the room. And at the first symposium that we had back in 2018, I invited one of my friends from Intel, Ruth Brain, who's very high up. She was an integration engineer, and she talked about her time as a graduate student at MIT, where she was the only female student in the room. And so, again, as I said before, in Europe, it's quite a bit different. It's much more balanced. I think it's becoming more balanced now in this country. But, back in the 70s and 80s and so on, it was not. Actually, another woman who I invited for this influential series, but she could not attend, I listened to her accepting an award from the Materials Research Society. She is of European descent, and she came to this country, and she was pursuing her doctoral research. When she told her doctoral advisor that she was pregnant, he stopped speaking to her. That was just so striking. And, fortunately, I was in a group with my professor, Arthur Noack, where one of the other female students became pregnant while she was working on her postdoctoral research, and he fully supported her. She was married to another Columbia University graduate student, and, she would bring her baby in and listen to the vacuum going, because it was a nice soothing sound.
Right.
And so, again, I feel that I was extremely fortunate because I had so many fantastic male mentors. And at the symposium, there was a lot of talk about, hey, you need mentors. And there was a lot of talk about female mentors. And I made the point of, hey, you need good mentors. And they can be female or they can be male. You just need good mentors who have an interest in you and your advancement and believing in you as, what you can do. And so there are certainly many men who mentor women to become great scientists.
Yeah. What's next? What's next for you this year? More symposiums, more visiting, the United Nations. Like, what's on tap?
Continue to be involved in the various scientific societies, but I have a new pastime, which is billiards, pool. And I currently have 3 coaches. One is Danny Baruti. He's the former New Jersey state champion. He resides in Portland. Another is Michael Yednak. He's world number 6. He resides in New York. And the other is Zion Zvi, Zion the Lion, and he is former number 1 in the country of Israel. And so I just started this in the past year. I'm learning, but I have a friend who I just met who's a professional pool player, a woman who has been to Vegas and won $15,000. And so I'm actually going to go to my first tournament next Tuesday with her at a little place right in LA where you only have to pay $10 to play and you can win $150. She came in second last Tuesday. I said, "How much did you win?" She said, "I got my $10 back." So I hadn't played in a month because I got a broken ankle when I was in Italy. I'm not going to go into that. So I couldn't play, but I played for the first time a couple of weeks ago at a bar right in my neighborhood, and I ran the table. I was getting applause from it, and so I considered that a huge accomplishment. So that's currently my focus. I have a lot of fun with it. It's mathematical because when you play pool, you have to look at angles. And I like to do bank shots. And when you do bank shots, you imagine a reflection of the pool table, and you're actually shooting for a pocket in the reflection. And so I've gotten pretty good at banking, and I'm hoping that I can, hone my skills. But this friend of mine, she practices for 5 hours a day. So to become a truly great player, you must practice. So that's, I think, what I'm going to do, just kind of, do that for fun. And I'll stay engaged with the American Chemical Society and the Materials Research Society, and, maybe plan a symposium, sometime in the future. And so we had one in 2018, we had one in 2025. So if I follow that, it'll be, a few years out.
So your current lesson right now is in billiards. But when you think back of your life, what is one of the greatest life lessons that you've learned?
Okay, so what is your greatest life's lesson? I had to think about this. And, a lot of people say, what are your accomplishments? And, you can think of life in terms of accomplishments, or you can think of life in terms of just your whole outlook. And So I would say that in order to, be happy, you need to live your life to the fullest every day. You need to understand that you're inhabiting a beautiful planet, the only inhabitable planet that we know of, and appreciate the little things in life: a full moon, a sunrise, a hummingbird in flight. And lastly, try to leave the world a better place.
Yeah, I love that. Tracey, anything else you want to add before we wrap up for the day?
I would like to add one final thing, which is some quotes from two women, and I read this at the end of the symposium held last September. The two women are Maria Mitchell and Marie Curie. Maria Mitchell was the first woman to become a female professor in the United States at Vassar College in 1865. She said, "We especially need imagination in science. It is not all logic, not all mathematics, but beauty and poetry." And Marie Curie, who had a lot of very famous quotes, and of course, she's known as the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize, the first person to receive 2 Nobel Prizes, and the only person to receive 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 separate scientific disciplines, chemistry and physics. And she named 2 elements, radium and polonium, the second after her country, Poland. She says, "We must believe that we are gifted for something and that this thing must be attained."
That's wonderful. Dr. Scherban, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing not just your journey, but also Camille's, Arlene's, and so many other women who are just making such an impact in the science community.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a total pleasure.
Awesome. Well, if this conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing the episode with someone else who's interested in advancing the STEM, science, women in science environment. If you'd like to hear more conversations with leaders like Dr. Scherban, be sure to visit marquiswhoshwho.com. Subscribe to the Marquis Masters podcast wherever you're listening. Once again, thank you so much to Dr. Tracey Scherban. I'm Nick Franck, and we'll catch you for the next Marquis Masters podcast.